Inclusive Learning Approach, ILA. Inclusive Advocacy Component, OPD's role in inclusive education. Organisations of people with disabilities, known as OPDs, have experienced the educational barriers facing learners with disabilities. They must play a role in finding solutions. These organisations are important advocates for inclusive education. They can raise awareness among school communities and help identify the actions needed. Parents of children with disabilities can work with OPDs to mobilise families to support inclusive education. OPDs can lobby the government to change policies, plans, and budgets. To do all this, OPDs must build on existing knowledge and develop advocacy skills. The facilitators. The Inclusive Advocacy Component supports OPDs to become stronger advocates for inclusive education. It trains and mentors facilitators from OPDs who become role models in their communities. The facilitators learn how to help other OPD members. Parents and community members become inclusion advocates. First, they learn facilitation skills so they can be confident trainers. They also learn how to adapt and update the training materials. The Inclusive Advocacy Component has so far been adapted for use in Uganda, Somalia, Zanzibar, and Zambia. In Uganda, the National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda used the component to strengthen its district-level inclusive education advocacy by training district union facilitators.
My name is Sarah Leah Diana, Project Officer in charge of Inclusive Education at NUDIPU. At national level, we trained a team of district union facilitators from Gulu, Amur, Moyo, Yumbe, Luka, Mayuge, Mpiji, Wakiso, Shema, and Kamwingi. The training was so productive. The district union facilitators were able to get skills on rolling out the training to the other people at the district, which includes the parents of children with disabilities, the district union board and committee members, the councillors representing persons with disabilities, and the local leaders in the community.
My name is Musema Farouk, DU Facilitator, Gulu. The capacity building training has really helped me as a person because one, it has developed my facilitation skills. I used not to have good facilitation skills, but due to this capacity building, I'm very good in delivering trainings that has really helped my community to understand about inclusive education.
Many of the facilitators are people with disabilities.
My name is Ronald Luima. I work for National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda as Program Officer in charge of inclusive education. Different facilitators have been trained, including those with visual impairment, and I have been one of those that have been training the other facilitators. As a person or facilitator with visual impairment, we have been trained to be very resilient, to be confident, to be assertive, but also to know our audience. This can happen when the environment is enabling. I have conducted some of the sessions that have been very practical despite the visual impairment. The first thing I've been able to do is to understand, first of all, my class, the audience, to know the participants that I have. Secondly, orient myself into the environment, that is the room where we are training from. But also 3, understanding the different needs of the participants that I'm going to engage. So I was able to, for example, if there is a labeled card where participants have to respond or to align with a particular topic, I was able to braille some of the cards. For example, while others will see labeled print cards, I could also put braille for those who can use the braille, but also large print for those who cannot read ordinary print, so that everybody is participating. Participation means that people are able to access your materials, people are ready to utilize them. So I used the PowerPoint presentation as well because I had JAWS on my computer, and I oriented myself into using it, how to navigate into the slides. But also I had a braille copy in case there is no electricity, the computer is not working, you are able to use the braille copies. Now,
The training content and approach. The Inclusive Advocacy Component has 4 training modules. They differ from the Inclusive Teaching Component modules by focusing on community involvement and how to advocate for inclusive education. Video clips and illustrations from a Ugandan artist have made the training modules more accessible for OPD members who have varied levels of literacy. The materials have been translated into multiple languages and produced in Braille. Sign language interpreters have attended every workshop. The modules encourage active learning during workshops. Participants use role play to reflect on their understanding and experiences of inclusive education.
Actually, my understanding of inclusive education has greatly changed because initially I thought inclusive education is just about including everyone in the education system. But now, due to this training, I clearly understand what inclusive education means. It is not only limited to children with disabilities, but it encompasses all children, those with and without disabilities, to all be learning in the same environment, in the same local environment. And it's not only about their presence in schools, but it goes beyond up to their participation and most of all achievement.
So my understanding of inclusive education due to this training has really changed. Before, I used to think inclusive education is segregated schools. This special school is what inclusive education is all about. But due to the training I got, I realized that inclusive education is quite different. It is about all learners staying in school, participating and achieving at the end. So it means when in any school which is near your location, a child is free to go to school, to get learning, to participate equally like others, and also achieve at the end. So I've understood very well that our learners are not the problem. It is the system of education. Because we used to see that a child who has physical or visual or hearing impairment, they are the problem. But due to the training, I got to understand that the system is the problem, and the system has to change to accommodate our learners with disabilities in school.
Practicing advocacy. It takes more than a training workshop to develop inclusive education advocacy skills. Between training modules, the OPDs put their learning into practice. they design and carry out advocacy tasks. Action research methods help the OPDs to reflect on, learn from, and improve their advocacy activities. The facilitators reflect on their progress as trainers and on the progress of the OPD advocates. They use a self-assessment learning tool.
We also gave them a self-assessment form, and this form they were able to assess themselves according to how they feel they have learned, whether they feel they are confident, whether they feel they are advanced in understanding. So they gave themselves an assessment, and some of them shared with us what they had written on their assessment form, and we realized that most of them are confident that they'll be able to deliver this module.
The OPDs have done many different practical tasks. They have gathered information on community attitudes to inclusive education and facilitated collaboration between OPDs, school inclusion teams, and community members.
For us to continue with inclusive education in our community, the most important thing is collaboration and use of the local available resources. Mainly because the reason why we are emphasizing on this is because of funding. You find most time when there is no donations, there is no funders, projects ends. So it is really important to involve the community, to involve the different assets that are within the community, collaborating with organizations that are working in schools, collaborating with different stakeholders to ensure that we collectively work together to ensure our children with disabilities are in school.
We also started on something of creating or organizing these parents of children with disabilities in their small associations as community-based organizations, and so far we have registered 2, and we have more parents joining. So we are going to create more groups of parents of children with disabilities. So through that association, we can raise more awareness. We can offer counseling and guidance services to parents with different cases of children with special education needs and disabilities, and other services that can be available.
The OPDs have helped school inclusion teams identify out-of-school learners and conducted inclusive education awareness raising in their communities.
But due to this training, we started doing awareness creation in the community about inclusive education. We started interacting with parents to ensure that these parents take their children to school. And also, with the knowledge I have, I've been moving to different platforms during weddings, during big programs in the district.
Yes, we've done something on awareness raising. We've done radio talk shows, community radio talk shows. We've had community gatherings. We are going to continue with those meetings until everyone gets to know more about inclusive education.
Those participating in the training have helped learners access assistive devices.
And as the district union, we have advocated for assistive devices for our children with disabilities, because we realize that most of our children with disabilities, they don't have access to assistive devices. So advocating for this from local leaders, MPs who supported us with assistive devices that we managed to give to our learners who are in school. And this has really helped in retaining our children in school because they have already wheelchairs. We also did some accessibility audit in the different schools to ensure that the environment is accessible to all our learners, and also ensure that toilets, classroom doors all have ramps that can help those who are using wheelchairs. And also we are trying to source for different support to ensure that the learners with visual impairment, they have their braille everything in place. And also we are trying to share the knowledge we have with other schools who are not still in the program of inclusive education so that they can adapt this great initiative.
They have also developed longer-term advocacy plans and strategies.
We are even going to include this in our strategic plan of the district union for the next 5 years. And we're also going to lobby the different stakeholders that we've been working with, like the local government, other NGOs working in this area, to also include this aspect, this concept of inclusive education into their strategic planning so that everyone has it in their programs and for the processes of budgeting.
Sustaining change. The Inclusive Advocacy Component has already started to affect change in just a few years. Ronald, from the National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda, explains some of the positive results emerging in Uganda.
The district union leadership, where the project has been running, have been capacitated through training to be able to advocate for inclusive education, to understand how government works. They now know who to relate with in terms of advocacy. They can network, they can collaboratively work with other human rights organizations within their localities, but also understanding the needs of the people that they advocate for. They are now a resource to not only to their district unions, kind of constituencies, but also to NUDIPU, because NUDIPU can utilize them to train other unions where not necessarily inclusive education will be advocated for, but also other issues that affect people with disabilities. The component has enabled NUDIPU to develop inclusive strategies that can be incorporated into the plans and agendas of our advocacy as an organization, but also the advocacy agenda of the governments where this project has been working. It has shortened or made it easy for NUDIPU to advocate for inclusive education in these districts, because now the power we have, the power of knowledge and skills as an organization.
The Inclusive Advocacy Component supports OPDs to become stronger advocates for inclusive education. Like any inclusive education initiative, to bring about lasting change, it needs to be sustained for more than a few years. Ronald reflects on the important next steps in Uganda.
There is need to, first of all, ensure that we keep in touch with the government's leadership, with the local governments and national level departments of the ministry, so that they take up our pleas. Secondly, engaging parents continuously to own their responsibilities to support these children. More is needed to sensitize parents of their role and responsibility. Attitude change is very key in terms of bringing parents on board. Use of role models. We can use role models. Parents don't believe that their children can be like some of us, but if we use the role models to speak to them, they will be inspired by what we do and probably change their attitude towards such learners. Lastly, on this, we need to review the different strategies of our organizations to ensure that inclusive education, capacity building of advocates in our respective branches is strengthened